Right, we
Good to
are
see you.
back. Yeah,
Good to see you.
and now we're in person. This is great. Chaz spends some of his time in Arizona and then, of course, here in Colorado, and that's why we've got you here in person now. So
Yeah, by the river. This is wonderful.
it's a fitting place, we were saying, because we both just love the river.
That's right.
And so, well, today, 301 section of this estate planning series, or this legacy series, is really about the more difficult portion of this, which is implementation. And it's one thing to talk about these sort of things, totally another to implement it.
Yes.
So thanks for taking the time. I see you brought your estate planning resource with you.
Yes. Well, the 101 and the 201 series were about what is this and why is it important and how do we go about getting it done.
Yeah.
And remember, we talked about if you start, I think it were your comments, you just chip away at it, take some baby steps, make yourself a goal for when you want to get it done, and make your progress as you go.
Yeah.
It's not so intimidating.
No, it's not.
So what I thought I would mention, if I hadn't already, is to get it started, you can always go down to the bank and get a detailed financial statement and complete it.
Yeah.
And use that as a table of contents.
Yeah.
So you start with number one and you detail that. And by the time you're finished, you have an excerpt or a letter to your family in the event of your death that describes all of the situations, the debt, the assets, and then you can go from there.
Yeah.
But I think that helps people get started. So,
I think so. It's such a practical way is to look at, well, what do I actually have that's worth letting my family know about on my passing.
And you've referred to this as a legacy box or a legacy portfolio.
Yeah.
I think that's fitting. And what I've done, and I just wanted to show you this, is it's a beast, but don't let it intimidate you.
It is a beast.
It's a beast. But this is what I call our estate planning portfolio.
Yeah.
My wife and kids know where it is.
Yeah.
And it looks gruesome. It's got lots of stuff and lots of tabs here.
Yeah.
But this includes all the things that in the event of my untimely demise, people are looking for everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all in one place. The copies of insurance policies for medical, automobile, any life insurance, and on and on. So it makes it so simple for family, particularly when something happens that's unexpected. You go right to this and you're ready to go. So I thought I'd just bring it along and show you.
That's incredible. I mean, mine would be a legacy paper or two.
Well, this is, I'm a little older than you.
I was going to say, you're about double my age,
it does include all the original documents.
Oh, does it? Okay.
That's why it's so doggone thick.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, let's get to talking about some of this. I know I certainly, when I started thinking about this and have started chipping away since we last talked.
Good.
Just chipping away with Vanessa. By the way, we watched this or did this together, Vanessa and I did.
Wonderful.
And that was so helpful.
Oh.
And I think doing this with your spouse was well, for us it was very helpful because it brought us on the same page in terms of why to do this.
Exactly.
And so as we've chipped away, I've started to realize, well, I'd like my parents to watch this and to also let me in on what they're doing. And that just all of a sudden gets into a really tricky conversation. I wanted to ask you, how would you go about talking about this sensitive information with your family members?
Well, that's the ultimate question, because we can do all this work, but if we don't implement it and people don't know about it, then it's kind of for naught. So as a matter of fact, when Jennifer, my wife, and I were going through a lot of this, we were talking about subjects that we'd never thought of talking about before. So it really did help us to gel our planning. And then the question is, like you say, you may want to bring this up with your parents if they haven't done something like this, or your children if you're a little older like me. And that, in my little outline here, what I've thought of is you have people who are willing to do this, happy to sit down.
Yeah.
And then you have people who are hesitant, don't want to talk about money,
Yeah.
think that maybe you get into this and you're money grubbing or something.
That's right. That's right.
So you have to first of all figure out where the willingness level is.
Yeah.
And I can just give you a personal example. In my father's case, as he got older, he had his things very well organized, but one document was here, one was at his office, one was somewhere else, maybe with me, and none of us knew exactly where everything was.
Yeah.
So when we began to put it all together and finally finish the 101, 102 equivalent,
Yeah.
we realized, and because I was in the law and it made sense for me to help him with this, we realized this is very important to talk to the family about. He wanted to do that.
He did.
Yeah, and it made it much easier because after bills and things and mother was provided for, he wanted an equal distribution to the kids of whatever was left. So that makes it a little easier.
It does. Yeah.
Sometimes it's not equal and there can be some friction, as we know.
How did he go about having that conversation? Did he plan a time where he gathered everybody together, or did he do it on a phone call? Do you remember?
Yes. We got together as a family several times, even though some of us were in college here or working there around the country. We'd get together for important holidays.
Yeah.
And he announced in advance that he wanted to take a day and bring this subject up and field questions and tell people what his thoughts were.
Oh, wow.
And so we were all prepared for it.
Okay.
And it gave us a chance to think about questions and whether we really wanted to ask them and all that stuff.
How much are you going to give me, Dad? I mean, that's a hard...
Absolutely.
But it's more the why that was probably so valuable for you.
Yeah.
I think now, your dad has passed, and knowing the heart behind it probably helped immensely.
Well, what was so fascinating is, and I think this is probably true in every family, there are things that have been unspoken and perhaps expectations that have been materializing over the years, and usually, or in many instances, they're never discussed until the lawyer starts reading the will, for example. And
tough.
people are in shock because they had no idea that this was going to happen, or that that's what Dad had in mind, or Mom. So we were able to do, in essence, a dry run with what he thought and with what his wishes were. And it gave all of us a chance to voice our opinions, our thoughts, offer some suggestions. And it really brought us close as a family.
Wow.
And that's the important thing here. We were talking earlier about how important relationships are, and I think especially family relationships. And if a figurehead of the father, for example, or the mother, were to take the initiative and gather the family to talk about this sort of thing, I can tell you in our case, he did this maybe 4 or 5 years before he died. And when he died, we got out the portfolio, we went through it to refresh ourselves, and all the people there, the spouses especially of the children, were so grateful that we had done this. And we all walked away with such a peaceful, we enjoyed the time together and felt that it was so productive. And that has continued as a tradition for us ever since. So what a wonderful legacy that can be.
Incredible.
Yeah. Now the question is, if your kids are a little shy about this, that's probably okay if the dad and mom ingratiate them into the process. But what about some parents who just, they don't talk about this thing, and that's death and it's unpleasant and not me. Well, I can give you a couple. I could give you many examples, but in one case that I remember, a gentleman here in town who owned a lot of property.
Yeah.
Wonderful guy. Everybody liked this fellow. He fell over in the bathtub one night, and he was gone.
Oh, you're kidding.
And he didn't plan on that, and neither did his 3 children. Well, suddenly, who are all adults and had their own spouses, and suddenly people were like, well, what did he have, and where does it go? and his wife was ill, and she couldn't recollect much about the finances. So it was left to several lawyers, and I was one of them, to go out. And she said, well, I know he had real estate, and that's in the public records. But I think he had some stock and maybe some precious gems. And I remember him saying something about burying them in the backyard. So here they are paying lawyer fees for people to run around and look under mattresses.
No.
It was crazy.
Did you get a shovel out?
Well, we did. And we found some things, and we never knew, and neither did the kids, whether we found it all.
Everything. Where's the property address? I need to buy this house.
So it eventually turned out, but it took a lot of money in professional
Oh my
fees.
goodness.
And a lot of consternation on behalf of the children at a time when you need family unity. So,
You know, I was thinking about this. There's an assumption that we all have that when our death or demise happens, we'll probably have some time. And whether that's we get older and so we start to see it coming,
yes.
or maybe we contract some kind of disease and we've got a terminal illness, but they've given us a time to deal with that.
Yes.
And so there's this sort of procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
We all think, I've got time.
Yes.
The problem that I see is when that time comes, if you're blessed with a couple months to get your affairs in order, so to speak, the last thing that you have clarity on at that point is how to deal with all these issues.
Yes.
Usually that comes with health issues, and so you're not feeling as strong and as healthy. And it's sort of a warning to the wise that when you have energy, when you have time, if we would put our energy there and even talk to our family about it,
Yes.
gosh, it makes a difference.
When you're calm and you're rational and you're healthy, you're going to make better decisions.
Absolutely.
If you're looking at impending death, which does happen, or you have a sudden problem, emotions run high.
They do.
And good decisions don't usually follow
No.
high emotions.
And they don't come right away. Good
Right.
decisions take time.
Yes.
Take patience, as the scripture says.
Good point. Patience with this is very important, because sometimes the answers come slowly. People have to digest some of the repercussions, and they have to think about it, and then they come back together for another meeting, for example. That's very helpful, the patience element. And I'll give you an example, and actually it does apply in my situation as well. But a friend of mine, whom I've offered some legal advice to, his family had a property in the East, a valuable property, and there was he and his sister. She was living in the East, he was living out in the West. So the question was, they couldn't really divide the property in half. He was very rarely in the East to use it. And the question was going to be, what would it appraise for?
Yeah.
So they decided to just put it off and appraise it on death of the parents. Well, here came the appraisal, and one party didn't agree at all.
With the appraisal price.
With the appraisal, thought it was very low. The other person thought it's not high enough, or it's not low enough. You know, there were differences of opinion.
Yeah.
And here's what happened. $700,000 in lawyer fees. 10 years later, they finally got it settled after a rift through the family that'll probably never go away. So, in this instance, and I'm in a not nearly as wealthy a position, but I'm in a similar situation with our little property up here at Vallecito.
Yeah.
And there will come a day when it has to be appraised.
Oh.
So what we've decided, in view of the problems that can happen, is to have family meetings, get all the factors out on the table. We might have a forest fire and lose it. And maybe we'll have inflation. It'll be worth lots of money. Let's have the children agree what it's worth now. And then, because my daughter is just like this other instance, she'll rarely be able to come out. She's in Wisconsin, doesn't get a chance to come out very much. We usually visit her. So with that in mind, we establish the value now, and she'll get that first at my death, and then the balance will go to charities and some to them, etc. But the important point is the appraisal will not become a major issue. And they have also said, incidentally, and this could be a little dangerous, but they've said, look, brother and sister, they love each other, and if there's a huge disparity on one or the other ends, they want the other to know that they're open to conversation, but that there is a fundamental agreement in place.
Wow.
So I don't know how that'll go in the future, but I trust that because of these conversations, it's going to go well.
I see a thread here, which is conversations.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you being open enough to share about your situation with the property that you're living in, and then the reality of its worth and value as you pass that on.
Yes.
For me, the big conversation is actually around my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, it's a hard conversation. Which person in my life would we choose to watch our kids if somehow both Vanessa and I at the same time passed?
Yes.
And man, we love all our family. We trust them all. And it sometimes feels easier to just not have those conversations. Because I would hate for somebody to say, well, they don't value me as a potential parent or guardian as much as someone else.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, it's my responsibility.
Yes.
And so this is challenging for me, frankly.
Yes.
But to work towards having those conversations.
That's wonderful, DJ. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I haven't specifically referenced that, but it's something that goes through all of our minds as parents. If you and Vanessa are in a plane and the plane goes down, suddenly what happens? Your children are young. Yeah. So to have addressed that in advance is just fundamental and very wise.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Man, thanks for saying that. So what I guess I'm hearing is take the risk and have the conversation.
Absolutely.
Whatever it is, start those conversations as a family in an open, in an honest, in a transparent way.
Yes. And when it comes to initiating all of this, it's very hard for a child to go to their parent and say, guess what I think we should do?
I want to talk about your money.
So the trick is having whoever's the dominant parent, let's say, going to them and talking about it, and if they're resistant, trying to find a way to get to their heart, because it is so important for the family and for family unity in the future. Now maybe I'm not the person to do that with my father. Yeah. But maybe my father has a very trusted friend who you can go to and say, "This is so important. Would you be willing to?"
This?
Yeah, a good friend or a pastor.
That's right.
Someone who has the parents' confidence. Yeah. That's one possible way. Another way, I suppose, is if you think your parent would be open to reading about this.
Yes.
David Ramsey, he's a Christian author. He's written a wonderful book that can apply to anyone, Christian or non-Christian. And it's called The Legacy Journey.
Yeah.
And he describes how important this is and gives lots of examples. Yeah. Well, if a parent would read that, they might be touched in a way that perhaps a child could not do with that parent. There's another thing that I've heard about recently, and I believe this is free. Peter Popper Press, Belongings, Business Affairs, and Your Wishes. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. How do you put this in writing and memorialize it so that you avoid family problems in the future? So
wonderful resources.
I wish I had some surefire answers for that one. When you have a resistant parent, and there will be many instances. I think I mentioned to you that my brother's accounting firm, which is fairly significant, my brother said that 70% of older people have not addressed this. Can you imagine?
No.
Can you imagine? And I just hear, as an attorney, I heard so much about the discord that results when you haven't done this. It's a tough subject, but you got to get through it, in my view.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you for
absolutely.
that. I just want to reiterate, take the risk.
Great.
Take the
Right.
risk.
You know,
Well-
one other thing I wanted to touch
Yeah, I
base
was going to say, as we close here, I hope you've made it to this part, because this may be the best part. Because when we think about legacy, we're trying to pass on not just stuff, but ourselves.
Yeah.
Is that right? I mean,
Absolutely.
as a 70-year-old man, I'm sure your life perspective has shifted from building and amassing to passing on.
Absolutely.
And so you have this great idea that I would love to hear about.
Well, I can't take full credit for this at all. My great friend Ted Rifkin and I and a men's group decided at one point we are so anxious to impart values to our kids, but free advice is one of the things in life that is rarely appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're cautious about that as parents, but we're yearning to give this child some of our experience and what we've learned, mistakes we've made, so that they can know how important certain values are. So we had, and I'm sure this has been done many times, that we came up with the concept of an ethical will.
Yeah.
So instead of transferring your property at death, you're transferring your values that perhaps were difficult to talk
Articulate.
about. Yeah. So, you know, a person could go anywhere with this.
Yeah.
And I'll just tell you what I did. Maybe it's helpful to some of you. I started out with a letter format, opening thoughts, and then I went to, in my case, faith and the important role that has in my life. Values, beliefs, favorite scriptures in my case. Other people may have favorite quotations or authors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gratitude, giving and receiving, getting along with others. Worry versus action, humor, learning from your mistakes, conduct and attitude, money, ambition, success, lessons to be learned. There are so many things that are important. Reflections on character, hope, forgiveness, living adventurously, and of course love. So by the time you think about these things and you know, as you get older, certain things stick with you and as having been very important, as having been items that if you had only known about when you were 20 or 30 would have made a big difference. And this is the place where you can talk about and share some of these things. So, you know, I have some concluding thoughts here. This is such a personal thing that it's really just announcing the idea that might be helpful. I had one little quip here of several that I had that I thought I'd share just in closing.
Great. Fantastic.
Success. You could use most any measure when you're speaking of success. You can measure it in fancy home, expensive car, or dress. But the measure of your real success is the one you cannot spend. It's the way your kids describe you when they're talking to a friend. That's great.
It is.
So DJ, thank you so much for this opportunity to
You've
share.
taken a lifetime to accumulate this, and to pass it on is so rich. Chaz, I'm looking forward to getting this out to people.
Good. Well, I think our common hope is that it will just help move people along this path, because it can be so important and so enriching for a family.
Thanks, Chaz.
So thanks again.
God bless you.
Thank you.